When you buy something, you expect to get what you paid for. If you are in a grocery store and you buy a bunch of things, and then the person says, okay, now I'm going to hold on to your money, but also take back all the things you just bought, you would instantly recognize the obvious injustice. That is a helpful way for anyone outside of political camps to understand what Trump is doing. While the media gets all excited about an election in Wisconsin that does not hit home for the vast majority of Americans, there is a much clearer story that the media should be focusing on. Talking of billions of dollars, people cannot relate to. But how about this? It's not just that if you buy a package of meat, you expect to keep it. It's that you expect it to be safe and not kill you because of inspections. If you get on an airplane, you expect air traffic controllers to make sure it won't crash into another plane. When you or your parent or grandparent get a pacemaker or any other kind of medical device, you expect that it will work. All of these expectations are based on things the government does that Trump, with no thought, no focus, no consideration, no anything, has just been slashing. That can make sense to anyone. Today, a guest will help us understand how much of this kind of thing is missing in the news and how that relates to the ways in which people vote. It's cyclical. The media doesn't tell stories that reflect so many people's lives, which then lead fewer people to pay attention to the media, which leaves more people unaware of much of what's going on. There is a way for the media to solve this. Someone I think of as a political whisperer will join me for that ahead. Plus, this is the 52nd episode of They Stand Corrected. We've completed a year here. To mark that, I'm going to piece through some of your comments and questions about a bunch of issues. About an anti-trans activist who was given an open mic night on a major network, about due process questions, about the most common anti-Semitic stereotype, and a major political figure. Plus, something of a prescription amid an onslaught of awful news. There is a life skill that's crucial, but it's not taught. I learned it the hard way, and I'm going to help you learn it now. All that and more coming up today as we celebrate a year of showing the media that they stand corrected. Hello and welcome. I am Josh Levs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. I'm feeling especially grateful today as we mark a year of They Stand Corrected. Thank you so much to everyone who is making this show possible by telling people about us, by rating and reviewing on the podcast apps, and especially to everyone who is helping financially by becoming a paid subscriber to the newsletter or making a contribution. These things make such a big difference here. With your help, hopefully we'll make it another year. There is sadly always a lot to correct in the media. With each episode, I send out a newsletter. It's got links, videos, more information, all kinds of things, because I don't expect you to take my word for anything. There are links in the show notes, or just go to my website, joshlevs.com, JOSHLEVS.com. Many of you know I spent 20 years in mainstream media, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN. During that time, I saw all these failures, and it just gets worse. Now that I'm on the outside, I'm able to fight the good fight. The topic I'm starting off with today is a perfect example. People are rightfully alarmed, disgusted. There are other words I could use too, for what Trump is doing. Even people who supported him, who voted for him, are still, in some cases, shocked by how much he is destroying. As I record this, numerous people from the CDC who have crucial jobs protecting the nation's health were just dropped out of nowhere with no foresight, no planning. This is not how efficiency works. Efficiency requires analysis, looking at which departments are doing certain things and not doing certain things, and giving them ways to save money and increase productivity. And by the way, Trump does seem to have no problem spending millions of dollars trying to ship people off to Guantanamo and then dropping that plan, or doing what he's currently doing with creating this new tax plan, helping the wealthy hold on to more money. None of this is actually conservative. It's not fiscally conservative. It's not efficient. In order to do anything about this, we need a new American majority of people who are sensible and understand facts. The media is not achieving that. People have learned to tune out because they're not guaranteed to get the truth from the media. Part of what is in the extensive study I discussed last week from Blue Rose Research is that people who do not follow politics closely were much more likely to vote Trump. Now, I have pointed out that there are ways the media could win over people if it transformed and became about facts. There's also something else. Millions of people look at Fox and other right wing outlets and see that it's speaking to them. To understand what needs to be done, I turned to someone who you might have heard last year. Marketers understand ways to design communications to reach more people. His name is Vaughn Emsley. He's a former top official at Saatchi & Saatchi, a global marketing powerhouse.
This low involvement issue is the most important thing which I think the Democrats have to address, because the way they talk and the way they explain or maybe over explain, the language they use, the imagery they use, is not connecting with people on lower incomes.
This is a media story, too. People who are paying a lot of attention to the news are more likely to vote Democratic. The other way to see that is that the news is not reaching people who are not interested in following politics all the time.
It's both. People are working hard, they're working long hours, maybe they're working two shifts. Their biggest worry is, do I have enough money to stretch to the end of the week to put food on the table by Friday? Now, there is a solution to that. You have to have a very simple story, very simple imagery, and a great deal of consistency behind that. The person who is best at that is Trump. Make America great again. We're going to build a wall. When you've got communication that's as simple as that, it doesn't surprise me that low information voters are voting for him in greater numbers.
Where's the media in all this? Because it seems very insular to me. These major news outlets are not presenting the news in a way that can reach all these other people.
I agree with that. We need fewer political science graduates and more people who would know how to sell encyclopedias door to door to get interest, both in politics and in newsrooms, because what they're not homing in on is the issues that people face every day that they need a solution to. If I was setting up a television channel today, news channel, I would base it around the concerns and issues of average income Americans and below average income Americans and the way they're living their lives. I wouldn't make it dreary and depressing. I would make it interesting and give value to everything that they're doing. But right now, they get swept aside.
When I was at CNN, we had this other network called HLN, and there were these conversations internally that they're trying to reach quote unquote low information people, but they weren't looking to reach low information people with the most important information. Instead, they were like, how can we get them to watch? So let's do like true crime stuff. And it's what you told me about when we spoke last year, this reality TV way of approaching news. What crazy thing can we show right now to get people to tune in? Instead of how can we become a valuable resource that people in these situations will want to tune into, whether it's in writing, audio, video.
There's a huge gap in the market for something that talks to middle America about what their lives are and their issues are in an intelligent, health, informative way.
What I reported last week was about how the media, right after the election, went into some of their favorite narratives, like, oh, she should have been harsher against Israel. The study shows the opposite. People saw her as too far to the left. There was also a piece I reported on that said that she should have been further to the left on big business. And this study shows that that's not the case. In these big establishment media organizations, all they knew how to do was say, she should have been further to the left like us. That seems very similar to the Trumpists in 2020. All these Trumpists could not believe that he really lost because they had these big rallies and they were like, we must be the majority. The media is not recognizing where an American majority really is.
Part of the problem with the media is they've become so intellectually flabby that they can't think beyond their existing prejudices. I don't think people are asking themselves uncomfortable questions. If you want to write about white Southerners, go and live with people for 4 weeks and follow them around and hear what they're saying. That's what I'm missing, real exposure to life as it's lived.
Progressives like to use this line. They say people don't see themselves reflected. They're usually
Yes.
talking about race and minority status. But what you're saying is people all over the country do not see themselves reflected in the media.
Yeah, exactly. It's only about me as a token. Oh, we went and interviewed 3 people on the street in Indianapolis, right? So we can talk with a senator and a governor about what really matters.
By the way, it really shouldn't be relevant, but the fact that people don't see you as quote unquote white, that they see you as a quote unquote person of color, in a way gives you an authority to talk about this, because usually people are saying, oh, people of color don't see themselves, but you're saying people across America don't see themselves in the news.
No, they don't see themselves, or they see caricatures of themselves. So none of that stuff that gets deep into real life is around in America right now.
I want to know what you think about all this. Coming up, I'll tell you how to get in touch. In fact, next, I'm going to look at your comments and tackle some of your questions. As part of it, I'll be sharing a portion of a recent speech in which I discussed a devious tactic the media uses.
And now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Josh Levs.
We are blessed to be able to have a speaker this evening who speaks with a lot of heart.
An outstanding author, a principled and groundbreaking journalist, a really engaging speaker and thinker.
Broadcaster, journalist, and host of They Stand Corrected, the podcast fact-checking the news. Thank goodness.
Josh spent 20 years reporting for NPR and CNN, where he developed unique expertise on nonpartisan fact-checking. He has been called Truth Seeker in Chief.
Josh has won multiple Peabody Awards, Murrow Awards,
and awards from the AP, from the Society of Professional Journalists, the National Association of Black Journalists, and more.
His book, All In, was published by HarperCollins and won the Nautilus Gold Award for promoting positive social change. He has spoken to the United Nations, Congress, Google.
And of course, I think is very cool, won a debate at Oxford.
He launched his podcast and newsletter called They Stand Corrected to provide listeners with the truth in a world of disinformation.
Clearly, he is a much-needed voice during these crazy times.
It's my pleasure to introduce Josh Levs to you today.
Please welcome.
Please join me in welcoming Josh Levs.
I love getting out there and meeting people like you. It's such a great opportunity to answer your questions and discover more about listeners to this show and potential listeners too. If you're interested in working out something in person or online, there's a form at my website, joshlevs.com. That's JOSHLEVS.com. You'll find a link in the show notes. Just click bookings. There have been so many comments and questions coming in, and I'm so grateful to everyone sending in this incredible feedback. You fuel me to keep going. The first place I look for feedback to share with you is from paid subscribers to the newsletter. There's an opportunity for them to send a message. So to those of you who have done so, let me tell you, check your messages after you do that, because I reply to you. Here are just some that have come through. Josh, new subscriber here. Love your work. Here's one. In this era of post-truth, your work holds immense significance. Thank you for doing what you do. Here's one from someone who said, go ahead and use their name. And it's especially cool because this is a former colleague of mine at CNN, Gary Carter. This is very important work, Josh. So very much needed today. Give him hell. I love this. I also get questions through the newsletter and the form at my website that anyone can use. You can just go there, joshlevs.com, and you will see a form. This is from Amelia Michael. She saw PBS interview this guy, Michael Knowles. I've mentioned him before. He's an anti-trans activist. She says PBS gave him a platform to spout lies with no other voices to speak for the truth. This anchor on PBS did try to counterbalance some of what he said, she wrote, but not nearly in a way that worked. Amelia, what you're talking about here is a big problem in news, open mic nights. This is standard practice in broadcast news. People think that they should book people who are controversial and interview them. And they think that that somehow in and of itself is journalism. Inside news agencies, they become very proud of their hosts or anchors. They say, oh, look, this person asked tough questions, but also listened. That is not the job of journalism. The job of journalism is to get you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth always. If you think that the person is worth speaking to, interview them, not live, record it, and share it with your audience in a fact-checked way. All right, here's one from Sabrina Rosenberg David, who gave this show a great rating. Thank you. She wrote, the Week Saturday Wrap refers to Mahmoud Khalil as a Palestinian activist who helped lead the Gaza protests, rather than, she says, what he really is. She's referring to this pro-terror radical from Colombia. She's right. These are the same news agencies that have no problem calling out sexism, racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, transphobia. But here we have a guy pushing support for the slaughter of the people of Judea, the people of Israel. And the media will not call him what he really is. Speaking of him, here is a question from another subscriber. He writes, love your work. Mahmoud Khalil, I agree with your assessment of the failings of the media to report the actual basis for disqualifying him for green card status. Could you further comment on due process, lest the Trump government get too comfortable disappearing people? Absolutely. Let me talk you through this. In an episode, I explained that this is not some great free speech case because there is a specific law saying that people who push support for terrorism cannot get green cards. The media is just ignoring that. They're not even looking at the law. And that is normal, by the way. News agencies rush to get opinions or quotes from people instead of stopping to look at the core fact. When this guy applied for a green card, he made a choice. He has to follow the rules for people on green cards. Now, if this guy did not receive due process that green card holders are supposed to receive under the law, then that is horrible and unacceptable. The people supporting this guy, these lawyers who have rushed to represent him for free, they are saying that he was disappeared briefly, taken somewhere, and that people were not told where he was being taken. And this is stuff we're hearing about other pro-terror radicals from certain campuses, that they might have been snatched off the street and not told, not given warning. It's absolutely possible. But if the folks at the top of this administration were clever about this, which they aren't, here's what they would do. Find someone in the country on a green card who has expressed support for far-right groups that support killing Black people or Asian people or anyone else that the far left cares about, and announce that that person is losing their green card. Watch what would happen with all these people who claim that it's all about free speech. Now, it's also possible that people here on green cards are less likely to be expressing that kind of support, partly because they would not find a big, public, proud audience for it. But if the administration found someone like that, they would be exposing the hypocrisy. I have also been doing live events in which I talk about the show. One event that I did is for a group called U+2. They are all about bringing in more non-Jewish people to help fight anti-Semitism. A listener named Seth sent me this. He said, I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. And then he raised a question about one thing I said. Let's listen to this section of my speech. It's a reference to something I discussed back in episode 5, the most common anti-Semitic myth.
The media pushes it in so many ways that even many of us have internalized it. And that is this insane idea that Jews cry wolf. People believe that Jews call criticism of Israel anti-Semitic. And they're so deeply convinced that this is happening that they don't listen when you tell them there are problems with anti-Semitism. It is like this giant moat around the structure of bigotry inside the media. And the media pushes this false idea through a tactic that is called the straw man fallacy. You pretend that your opponent is saying something they're not really saying, and then you argue with that. The media engages this all the time. People say to a guest, is it anti-Semitic to criticize Israel? And then the person shoots that down. The more you hear that, the more your brain becomes convinced, oh, these Jews are always saying that stuff. And then you can find some Jewish people who say, oh, no, it is true. Because once I criticized Israel, and I was called an anti-Semite. Well, two things about that. There is hard data. 0% of Jews think it is anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. No one thinks that. You're not arguing with anyone. But the other thing is, sometimes you say something about Israel that is anti-Semitic, and everybody should be able to recognize that. For example, if you're going around using these Hamas claims about genocide and all this stuff, and you've never mentioned or cared about minimum probably 600,000 Ethiopian civilians killed in war this decade, hundreds of thousands of civilians killed in Syria, including 1 year, 110,000 by the best numbers we have, and you never mention it, and you don't care, and it doesn't occur to you to care, but you flip out about some alleged genocide by Israel, that is anti-Semitic. Not because I say so, but because the word has a definition. It's a form of bigotry. If you choose one group to fixate on it while ignoring what everybody else does, that's just bigotry by definition. When people say to me, Jews do this all the time, I say to them, name me one person who has ever said it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. I say, you are participating in the straw man fallacy, look it up. Leave them confused. They know how to Google. They can look it up. We need to start dismantling it entirely.
By the way, that is something I've been realizing more and more lately in these live events. That moment of confusion is a good thing. It's the moment in which you realize that the media has been misleading you, has been lying to you. And then people come to the podcast afterwards to learn more, and the confusion is cleared up. Lots of the responses I get from you all are about clarity. One paid subscriber writes, "Thank you for the work you do to clarify issues. What passes for news is so often blatantly biased or thinly veiled opinion that I'm grateful to find someone willing to weed through the minefield of nonsense." But back to this guy's question. So after the nice praise, he said, "I did not agree, however, with your assertion that no one has said that criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. Netanyahu," that's a reference to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, "has played the anti-Semitism card repeatedly in response to criticism of his government. He said the UN, the International Criminal Court, and the campus demonstrators were all anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel." He added, "I understand that too often folks who criticize Israeli policies carry such positions over to being anti-Semitic in general, but that's a different problem. Thoughts?" All right, no matter how you feel about any individual, about Trump, about Netanyahu, about anyone, looking at facts requires what can be a difficult effort to set aside those feelings. Here goes. It's not accurate to say that Netanyahu called those groups anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel. He didn't. That didn't happen. And I know the first reaction that some people have is like, well, maybe they don't actually say that, but every time someone criticizes Israel, they call it anti-Semitic. That's not true either. In fact, Netanyahu, when he is not the one in power, he is one of the biggest critics of the Israeli government. He did not call any groups anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel. Meanwhile, and again, we have to get past emotions to see this, the UN, the International Criminal Court, and these groups on college campuses are anti-Semitic. As you heard me talk about there, not because I say so, but just because that's what the word means. The UN regularly ignores horrific actions all over the world and keeps getting together to pass resolution after resolution hating on Israel, many of which are based on lies and include lies in their writings. This kind of bigotry is something that people recognize in other situations. Let's imagine a teacher has 20 students, 19 of them are considered white, and one of them is considered black, and the teacher doesn't care how horribly the 19 students behave. But anytime the teacher even suspects that the one black student might be speaking out of turn or cheating or doing anything, the teacher flips out and says that student must be suspended from school. That is racism because it's racism, not because I say so. All right. The UN does that all the time. The International Criminal Court does the same thing. People try to bring so many cases to the International Criminal Court and also the International Court of Justice. I've talked about this before. There are two different things, and people get them confused. I did an episode about international law in which I went into that. They turn down cases all the time. But anyone wants to say something horrible about Israel, well, they have time for that. Same with these groups on college campuses. They don't care about all the horrific things going on in the world, but they push Hamas claims about Israel. These are all acts of anti-Jewish bigotry. That's just a fact. Nothing about this is an opinion. And by the way, I discussed this in an earlier episode as well. People use the money excuse because they don't have an ethical excuse. They say, no, no, no. The real reason that we're subjecting Israel to this totally different set of standards is money. America gives money to Israel. Well, these folks have never looked at the list of nations that America gives money to. I posted the list. I posted the chart. They don't care. Another top recipient, Ethiopia. If you combine what several Arab nations get from the United States, it's more than what Israel gets. And those Arab nations do less for America combined than Israel does. People don't look. And there's no proportional coverage in the news of nations based on the amount of money they get from anyone. So that is a canard. Campus protesters justify Hamas, downplay its atrocities, have never set up encampments for huge wars with massively bigger death tolls and incomparably bigger civilian ratios. Nations that don't do any of the things Israel does to limit civilian casualties, they only care when it's done by this teeny tiny Jewish entity, which is a dot in a huge sea of MENA, of Middle East, North Africa, Arab and other Muslim nations. They don't care. There's no way out of this because words have definitions and facts exist. That is anti-Semitic. Coming up, amid the onslaught of craziness from this administration and bad news, a life skill to help people face the world. Signing a very simple and important petition, visiting a website that might interest you, joining a free webinar with someone you recognize from the news, or pledging future support for a group of medic heroes. Thanks to sponsored partnerships, at just about all times, there are free steps that you can take. Each time you do, using my unique links, a little bit of money comes to support this show. Find the links in the show notes or my newsletter. I had a very unusual experience as a journalist. My work at CNN involved a couple of things. One was online, covering multiple top stories in the world every day, gathering all the information we could, putting it together in a way that made sense to people. So each day I was looking at the worst things happening in the world, which were often wars, natural disasters, terrorist attacks. I was also on air and doing a lot of fact checking. And part of what I always wanted to do was look for stories that were being missed as well. So I was subjecting myself each day to this onslaught of horrible things. And I've been thinking about that again lately, as many people feel overwhelmed by the things the Trump administration alone is doing, or by global hate movements like anti-Semitism. All these things can feel overwhelming. I remember at one point I went to a therapist. He asked what was on my mind. I told him something going on with my son. And I said, and also this stuff going on with Syria. And then he said, well, which of those is more real to you? He thought the answer would be obvious. It was my son. But I said, I am seeing these things in the world and thinking about the world that will be here for my children. But I learned that there's a skill, one that we're not taught, but one that people need. Learning to live with the knowledge that horrible things happen, but great things happen all the time too. Learning to see the positive, limit your intake, avoid spiraling, avoid catastrophizing. That's a necessity. Sometimes listeners say to me, I haven't been able to follow the news that closely lately. It's too much. I say, good. Limit your news intake. It's good to learn some basics. And I try to talk you through some really important ones here on this show. But do limit your intake. And there are ways to check yourself. If you notice that your mind is spiraling when you can't stop thinking about something, well, that doesn't help anyone, doesn't solve anything. Learning to shift your mind, relax your mind, go find great things to be happy about and excited about. That's necessary for health. And there's another part of this. The people who got us here to where we are right now, the people who gave us the science that helps us be healthy and comfortable, the people who gave us our freedoms, our freedom of expression, democracy, these are gifts from previous generations. When you give someone a gift, you want them to use it. You don't want it to just sit away somewhere, right? Like if you give someone flowers, you want them to be in water and kept to look beautiful for as long as possible. You give someone something to use in the kitchen, you want them to use it. You give someone beautiful artwork, you want them to put it on the wall and get a positive feeling when they look at it. The gifts that brought us here, it's up to us to enjoy. Yes, enjoy. And that means finding ways to enjoy life. I'm not saying don't fight the good fight. The opposite. I fight the good fight. Let's all fight the good fight. And continue to find ways every day to love life as much as possible. That is the thinking behind this show. It's the reason that I can tell you about these horrible things and have happy music along the way. And I'm smiling right now. I love what I'm doing. I love that you all are making this possible. I love that you're listening. And I want to hear from you. As always, there are two great ways to reach me. One is through the newsletter. The other is through the form at my website. I actually, believe it or not, do have a vacation coming up. So I might be off for 1 week or just be in with something very quick that 1 week and then resume full length. In the meantime, share this show with every cool human being on Earth. That's not too big a task, is it? I'll let you start with just one continent. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you either next or the following week.